everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of Client Horror Stories, where we dive into, client horror stories and we extract lessons so others don't make the same mistakes that we did. I'm honored today to have the one and only Collin Slattery here. Thank you for joining me via Zoom, Collin.
Thanks, Morgan. It's definitely good to be here. I'm excited to share my story and hopefully can get some lessons out of it for other people so they don't experience the same thing.
So hopefully something good comes out of it.
That's right. That's right.
Let's jump right in. I have my tea ready to go.
Well, I mean, we have so many different options to choose from, but I think the one we wanted to talk about was clients not listening, ignoring red flags, and
Totally
not listening to yourself when you know kind of what is going to happen, but not trusting yourself.
Not trusting your gut.
That's right. Yeah. And
you need a lot of pain before you learn to listen. That your gut usually knows the right answer.
Well, and sometimes you have to relearn that lesson even once you've learned it before. But hopefully we can certainly help other people reduce the number of situations that they run into with those sorts of clients, and clients not caring as much about, let's say, their business as you care about their business.
Oh, this sounds like a good teaser. So what's the context or the background for this client, or tell us the story?
Sure. So, I do a lot of work with small DTC brands. So, new e-commerce brands, lots of different verticals. And so this was actually last year. So this was 2020. We started working together in, I think it was April or May, and then stopped working together in August.
By the way, I will point out, knowing nothing other than this, that was just as the pandemic was getting crazy. So it was a particular moment where everyone was like, oh my God, what's happening? So crazy clients were likely to be even crazier then.
Yes. And they had been doing some advertising actually, but they weren't happy with the previous agency. And, we're bad mouthing the previous agency, kind of red flag number one. And so we were working together, and
actually, I just want to interrupt. That's a really good red flag to point out. Bad mouthing the previous agency. It's definitely a red flag, one that I didn't realize when I was younger. And the metaphor I would use is if you start dating a girl who only has terrible things to say about her ex-boyfriends, you would think, you have so many bad ex-boyfriends. Is it really every guy's really bad, or maybe you are doing something wrong?
Exactly. Yes, that is definitely kind of the perfect analogy for it. Yeah, and like I'd say, if they have something bad to say about like one agency,
yes.
But if they're burning through them and they never have anything good to say, it's I should have brought like a red flag prop for this, but
my red shirt.
There you go. Maybe we can Photoshop one in, raising a red flag. So that was definitely, early, something I ignored in the kind of discovery process for sure. But one of the things that I've noticed, and this is kind of, I guess, what we're going to get into a broader discussion of. Early companies, there's a lot of things that go into like successful advertising, right? Most of the people I imagine who are listening, I hope, or possibly watching, understand that advertising is just kind of like one component of the successful ecosystem, right? Like we're going to bring the traffic to the website, but it's your products that are going to help. Like it's how well your website converts, what your emails look like. So it's a whole big ecosystem of factors that go into success. And the advertising is just one component of it. And so being the sort of experienced advertiser that I am and working with lots of brands, will frequently work with these small clients and give them lots of suggestions on like, here's things you should do with email marketing. I'm not an email marketer, but I understand, what is necessary and like give them guidance on things they should do. I don't run a CRO agency, but I use Hotjar and can be like, okay, well, your call to action is below the fold. Like maybe let's move that up so that you're going to get better conversions, things like that, to help with the other elements of the business that ultimately are necessary for them to be successful and for us to make sure that they are successful. And this client had, and this is not the only situation, had kind of this belief that advertising is magic, and that if the they have to do nothing, and if the advertisement isn't working, the ads aren't working, it's the advertiser's fault. And there's like, anytime they're suggesting, let's say, improving your CRO, it's just passing the buck.
Ooh.
It's the advertiser trying to blame the brand for the failure of the advertising. And from my standpoint, go ahead.
So that's a good one. I've definitely encountered clients and potential clients that have this attitude that no, a good advertising can solve all of the problems. Did you do it? Did you realize that before you started working with him? Like, did they give you signs that this was his attitude before you started, or have you since developed ways in which you can sniff or smell if someone has that attitude? Because it's important to avoid that.
Yeah, so there were definitely signs, right? So, one of the things that they said, the previous agency had said was you need to get your email marketing set up and running better, set up Klaviyo, for example, which is, one of the big email marketing systems for TTC and transactional sort of things. And where like that was one of their complaints about the last agency was they didn't feel like they were taking responsibility for their failures. And I was like, yeah, well, I really wanted the business. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds right. And to, then got them as a client, and the other agency was right on a lot of those things. And they had no interest in sort of investing in the business from their side of things. And I've started incorporating a process going forward and since that, where I start asking questions about what they're doing for the other areas and how they're approaching, like, what are you doing for email marketing? Are you using Klaviyo? Can you tell me a little bit about your email marketing flows that you're running? Are you seeing success from those? Are you doing CRO? Are you using landing pages? Getting a better understanding really about what they're doing from an investment standpoint into their business and like the success of their web business as part of the overall sort of marketing structure, so that the advertising work that we're doing can slot into its proper place in the overall sort of system that they have set up and they're working on improving. It's not just them believing that kind of like advertising is a magical money tree where you just shake it and profit comes out, and it doesn't matter, what they're doing. They can just sit there and count money and do nothing.
So, something I found is that clients with that attitude, you can never convince them otherwise. If they think something is, if they believe in magic, they believe in magic, which is why I like using questions to basically know not to take on clients like that, not to try to change their minds.
Yes, you're definitely right. I think ones who are able to be convinced that they're wrong is definitely the exception to the rule. I haven't found one yet, so I haven't found an exception to the rule. So it must be various small exceptions to that rule. But yeah, no, I mean, they generally are, as you say, very set and convinced that they're correct, that it's not about anything that they're not doing. It's just, it's your fault for being a bad advertiser.
I, I I think the reason why most human beings think like that is because the alternative is to view the world as a massive set of lots of really complex small variables. And it's just much harder to understand and process the world, whether it's just these million little things to tweak as opposed to good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also hard to, and look, I'm will readily admit that I struggle with this as well. I'm sure most people here probably do. And that's, something that you believe and then getting data to the contrary, it'll frequently make you sort of double down on your position instead of being like, okay, let me, um, you know, accept this new data that's come in, like
Yeah,
analyze the new data and potentially, change my position based on that data. And it's not an easy thing to do by any stretch of the imagination, but uh, digital advertising and digital marketing, it's a data-driven world, and we have to, you know, trust the data, and when it tells us it's wrong, like, let's look at it and really,
I,
take it
oh,
in.
totally. I want to get a quote in here that I really like, that I think is relevant. John Maynard Keynes, the famous early 20th century economist, famous for always changing his mind on lots of like big political issues. And he was once at a press conference where one of the reporters asked him, well, you change your mind so much. What about intellectual consistency? To which Keynes had the beautiful response of the following: when I get new data, I come to a new conclusion. What do you do, sir?
And
I,
that's perfectly encapsulates kind of like, especially with digital, like what you should be doing and then should be doing generally. And also obviously speaks to his intellect, that he was able to do it so naturally and so easily. Like that was his
Agreed.
default.
Agreed. And it also speaks to his humor, because I love how he ended that with the sir. What do you do, sir? Like this fake respect towards an idiot. It's a bit like a fuck you. Like, so he was also clearly a funny guy.
Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with, I hadn't been familiar with that quote until you shared it, but I like it, and we'll probably start using it. I'll write it down and memorize it.
Get some value from this. By the way, for the podcast notes for each episode, we've been calling out the literary quotes that one of us uses, trying to give a literary bent
Okay.
to this. So we'll probably it'll be in the notes. But so okay.
I was gonna say, I think you're primarily the literary guy here, so I don't know if I have too much to contribute on that one.
I did a recently with Josh Silverbauer where he was doing all these crazy musical quotes in order to make his points to support his argument about his crazy client. So you feel free to use song quotes if it's more fun.
I mean, I might get some Family Guy quotes in there. I can't promise you anything though. That's about the level I operate at, unfortunately, or fortunately, perhaps.
No judgment. Okay, so this is okay. Okay, so now that we have all this context about the red flag, he had this magical thinking. As you started working with him, you realize that the other agencies' warnings were correct. Like, what happened?
Well, one of the first things that we were doing is, getting their advertising set up in the way that, like, we get it. So every agency has their own systems. We have our structures that we work with, and going through their data and the stuff that we're working with, there were a lot of problems particularly from the conversion side. So I do use like Google Analytics and
Yes.
Hotjar to try to identify areas where there's conversion loss, like, is your website taking too long to load? Like, if it's taking
Yes.
10 seconds, like, no one's going to buy anything. So like, I trying to identify the areas where problems are so that we can address them to improve them. And the advertising wasn't performing particularly well, unless we were doing like an incredibly aggressive sale, which is kind of another component of this if we want to discuss that. And I'm spending a lot of time on stuff that not necessarily should really be spending time on because I really want to see them succeed. So, putting together these large documents where like, here's the report from Hotjar, here's some recordings kind of like showing you where people are getting stuck. Here is comparing like your mobile traffic to your desktop traffic in Google Analytics and how like your bounce rate and your conversion rate is significantly worse on mobile because your pages aren't really optimized for mobile. And here's what you should do to fix it. And just they had no interest in doing any of it. And like, I don't think it's a problem with the website. We've never had a problem with the website. I just don't think your advertising is very good. Here's, the things that you need to do to fix your advertising. And, I was kind of offended because, the advertising is good, like getting a lot of people to the website, and it wasn't converting. And part of that could have been the advertising, but I also was able to identify through data, like things that they should be improving. And, we're completely unwelcoming to the idea that, maybe there were issues that they should be correcting and areas of improvement that they could be making, and not just, me with my magical money tree not shaking it properly.
Okay, so this is interesting. It's good to get color on this guy's magical thinking. So what this leaves me wondering is, did you actually before that, I want to point out, it was a red flag went off in my head when he told you, oh, here are the things you should be doing. Like that is another very good red flag to look out for. Like, the healthy clients are ones that trust you as the professional and the expert, and the unhealthy ones are ones, I know nothing about this, but I'm going to tell you exactly what to do.
Yes, that is a huge red flag. I mean, this client, red flags all over. We'll be identifying them all over the podcast. Yeah, the best clients are always the ones who are like, we hired you because you're a professional. I have no idea, but we trust you because this is your job. Go do your job because that's why we hired you. If you ever hear like, I'd be doing it myself, but I don't have the time, just run away. run away.
But I also, that's a really good nuance to it. I want to add another nuance to it, where I've also seen clients, sometimes the client happiness changes over time. They're happy at first, but they become more frustrated over time. Like they have a bad program manager or account manager, account executive that they're working with, for example. Or at first they're optimistic that the results will be better than it's realistically possible. So I've seen clients change from being hands off to, over time, being increasingly meddling. So it's good to be sensitive to that change, because the client's getting more into the details is usually a sign that they are less and less satisfied with your work.
Yes, that is definitely something that you'll notice. It's always a bad sign when a client starts getting like really nitpicky about things. So yeah, that's not a good sign for sort of client longevity. And frequently it'll be something that's not even related to you. But yeah, like wanting to be incredibly hands-on at the beginning and telling you what to do, not a good sign. Definitely not a good sign.
Like, whether it's in the beginning, middle, or end, it's never a good sign.
No.
And also, to be clear, it's not always because the client is an annoying client. Like sometimes, like you're just not good enough, and you have to recognize that. Especially if we're speaking to younger versions of ourselves, like all of us doing the same work 10 years earlier, you just don't have as much experience as we have now. So sometimes the clients are completely justified in being frustrated in this way.
Sure, and sometimes the math doesn't work out, and that's kind of a different topic. But like sometimes the business that they have, where their business is, like they just can't make advertising work, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your fault or their fault or anybody's fault. It just is not a situation where it's gonna work. And that's frustration for everyone. It's a situation where you'll be putting in more work and you'll be losing money because you're working too much and it's still not working. And sometimes it's just
totally,
sorry that we couldn't make this work. We tried our best. Our best. That's right.
So with this client, he started meddling more, giving you suggestions. And then what happened?
I mean, that started pretty early, actually. So I was like, oh, they're like telling me exactly like what images to run on the Facebook ads, and like, no, don't use this copy, don't say this, say that, and like telling me when to run things. It was like super hands-on. So that was pretty early on. And, I tried to push back ultimately, but I wanted the client, I wanted the money. And so I did kind of let them dictate what was going on. And ultimately, like, it didn't work because lots of reasons, like their website wasn't good enough, but also like what they were telling me to do was not what I believed was the right thing to do. And, express that, like, don't think this is going to work. And here are the reasons why I don't think it's going to work. Let's do this. I've seen this work with other similar clients, but was ultimately, let them kind of dictate it. And it didn't work. And I got blamed for it.
Before we go into the blame, I have a question about that.
Yes.
So when clients are like that and they really pressure you to do something that is not going to work, like they want you to use these images and that type of image won't have the results. Sometimes I feel like I should have a policy of like the moment the client crosses the line, because that to just step down. It's like you can push back, saying no. In my professional judgment, I think we shouldn't do this. And if they agree with me, great. But if they don't agree with me, then I often think I should just be much stricter. Like there's like you cross that line, like it's like sorry. And sometimes I feel like the metaphor is with lawyers. Like lawyers have a similar back and forth with their clients to get the right wording in a contract. But if a client insists on putting something that the lawyer thinks is illegal or bad or will hurt the client, lawyers will just refuse to do it. So sometimes I think PPCs and digital advertisers should have that similar legal ethos. What do you think?
So it's something I struggle with. In concept, I agree with you. And I think if you're in a position where you can do it, that's great. Because ultimately that is a position where you have to be willing to lose the client over that sort of situation where I feel like, no, I'm not doing what you tell me. I mean, frequently, if it's gotten to that point, their response is going to be, okay, I'll find someone else who will. So you definitely have to be in a position where you're okay with that. I do so I always talk about like like a PPC Hippocratic oath, like do no harm, like a first do no harm to the clients. And obviously that's how I try to operate in everything that I am doing. And it's a challenging situation for sure when what the client is telling you to do and you've pushed back already. And you've been like, I'm in my professional experience advising that this is a bad idea and we shouldn't do this. And then they're like, do it anyway. It's a tough position to be in because ultimately they pay your retainer. But yeah, I think if you're able to say no and you're in a position to say no, I think it's good. I know a lot of people, especially if they're earlier on in their career, probably don't have the luxury of like getting rid of work and getting rid of income. But I have actually thought in terms of going forward, like in those situations, having them sign a document that basically says, this is being done against sort of my professional recommendation, and I am not responsible for the results of this action. So like we'll do it, but there's a thing you have to sign, owning it.
I have to say, I kind of like that idea, and it could just be like as easy as a simple web form that you give them, where they have to click agree, type in their name. That makes it super clear and objective. You're going to start using the Keynes quote that I told you. I think I might start using the idea of getting clients to sign their name when they pressure me on to do things that I think they shouldn't do.
I think it's a really valuable tool. And I think I haven't used it yet, but I think it's a very valuable tool in concept, because you're also then putting it on them, right? So like, and to be clear, to everyone who's listening to this, you should have in your contracts like no guarantee of specific results and all kinds of other clarifications to make it so that your clients can't sue you. Because if you're like, the worst sort of position that you could be in is like your client forces you to do this, right? And then it doesn't work out, and then they sue you over it, even though it was their idea and they forced you to do it. So having this sort of document does protect you against that to a degree, but it also puts it back in their court where like they now have to own this decision, because you're literally telling them, this is not me, I have nothing to do with this. You have to acknowledge that you're doing this despite my strongly worded stance against it. And here's a document that I need you to sign in order to do it, because I'm not owning this, you're owning this. And so I think it's going to make it more real for the client. And maybe they won't do it, but at worst case, you do it and you're more protected against some of the downside risk.
Yeah. What I like about that idea is the psychological power behind it. It really makes the other person be really sure that they want to.
It slows it down too, because I mean, a lot of times, and it's natural, like you get worked up and you're like kind of like spinning yourself into a tizzy, and like this can put the brakes on it a little bit, and give them actually a little bit of space to think about it more, and hopefully be a little more reasonable, or at least in concept. I believe that it should work that way. I hope people will apply it, and then let me know how it works for you.
Send both of us emails, contact information below.
That's right. My email's right there.
Exactly, as they do in YouTube videos these days.
That's right.
So this is interesting.
Hit the bell, subscribe, contact below.
The sad part is they do that because it works.
Yep. Yeah. They split tested it. They have the data.
Exactly. They have the data. Back to Keynes. So I'm going to backtrack to something you said about five minutes ago that I thought was interesting. The Hippocratic Oath. At first, do no harm. because I'm a pretentious asshole, I usually say it in Latin, primum non nocere. So uh, so I will admit I'm kind of an anti-Hippocratic Oath guy, because I I would fight the Hippocratic Oath by saying to make an omelet you have to break some eggs, and that is like in other words, you often have to do small amounts of painful things in order to get the big benefit. To use a very modern example, are vaccines. What is a vaccine? They take a really, really tiny version of that disease. And by getting a tiny version of that disease, you're inoculated against it. For example, I often bring on the pain. I have clients or employees or partners that are behaving badly. Let's have the painful conversation, do harm, have the hurtful conversation, say the difficult things that need to be said, because by bringing the issues out to the front now and discussing it openly, as difficult as it is, it's usually will avoid much bigger problems when things just build up, and then explode.
So I don't even really view that as like doing harm. And in general, when I think about doing harm, I do think about, generally very specific sort of things. And that is, dangerous or like truly wasteful advertising in a non-experimental capacity. Because ultimately, as you say, you do have to break a few eggs. There are going to be things that don't work out. So I'm always, work with clients where we have an experimental budget, and I tell them, like, the thing about testing is that it's not all going to work. Shit's going to fail spectacularly, and it's good because that's a learning experience. But when there are things like, don't want them to waste lots of money on, stuff that is not going to make sense. And, we'll say that, or, one of my favorite examples, and I use this all the time, is like, well, why don't we just like pull these images from these other websites and use them? And like, what could go wrong? And I'm like, well, you get sued by the photo sharing companies and it's $5,000 each time. Pay the $10. I'm not using images that you pulled from somebody's website. So, in terms of like other things, so it is sort of like specific things like that, or when they're like, yeah, let's build a mobile app for $50,000. I mean, and it's, like I said, it's not in my advertising sort of area, but you're a small moving company in New York City. Do you really need an app? Is anyone downloading your iPhone app? No, they're not. So don't do it. It's a waste of money. Because, like I said, do no harm, no actual harm. Painful conversations are ultimately usually where the real growth happens. So I don't really consider those to be harmful, because they're, they'll live, and hopefully their business will prosper because of the conversation.
Yeah, I guess it's the question of harm. Or what is harm? I think I just know a lot of people, because I think you're a New Yorker, so I think New Yorkers, Lynn, I'm also a New Yorker. New Yorkers are very used to like be blunt, straightforward. So saying the difficult things isn't harm for a New Yorker. That's just how you talk in New York. You say the blunt truth, no matter how hard it is. Like,
you do.
That's not being harmful or hurtful. That's just being a New Yorker, as opposed to when you live in the Bay Area. Like I live in California, San Francisco, a long time, and in the Bay Area, like no one wants to like say anything that's not nice towards anyone ever. I'd rather ghost and disappear than say something not nice. And I think and those are the cases where they view it as harmful to say words that aren't nice. And my view is the vaccine view. You need a very little bit of that hard conversation, so that I love your phrase, like it's hard conversations where the growth and learning happens. Because if you have that little bit of toughness in that conversation, that's where both sides learn to improve for the future.
Yep, growth is uncomfortable, and you're not going to find growth and improvement and expansion in your comfort zone, whether that's relationships or advertising as well. Like you're if you're running an agency or you're freelancing or whatever, the times when you're going to see kind of the most improvement in your business, in your operations, are when you're doing something that feels a little beyond your capabilities. And it probably will be, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to be concerned about it, but that's how you get better and grow, whether it's a business owner or just freelance or whatever. Like, if you're just doing the same thing you've always been doing, you're not growing.
I agree. Okay, so let's get back on track. So it was clear working with this guy. He was meddling, telling you to do lots of bad things. You would push back, but he would pressure you to make these changes that were against your professional judgment. You didn't yet have the idea to make him sign something to do that. So that didn't happen. And did it blow up at one moment? Or if not, how did it end? I'm excited for the denouement, the drama.
I mean, the ending was pretty messy. Like they were really unhappy, and like there were angry phone calls. Like, we're not going to pay you. I did end up getting stiffed for I think it was 2 months worth of work or something. Another lesson: like, don't keep working if they stop paying their bills. And it felt nobody won in this situation. Like, I put in way too much work on something and invested way too much effort and energy on my side of the equation, when they just were not willing or able to do it themselves. It did not feel like a partnership. It felt like I was doing everything, and then it was never good enough, and was getting blamed for when they're dropping the ball. And so it was a fairly contentious end where wasn't getting paid, and they were angry, and I was angry, and it was bad. It was not good. It was not a happy, like, it's just not working, let's just call it, best of luck to you. It was like, fuck you, I don't know if we can curse on here. Maybe you can put a big bleep thing over me when I say that.
No,
but
I like using the vulgarity. It brings out the emotions and the strength.
Yeah, I was pissed. And like, they were obviously unhappy too, but we invest a lot in our clients and in trying to see that they are successful, or all of the people, probably all the people listening, because you're listening to a podcast to learn and improve, so clearly you also are invested. And when you invest all of that, I mean, it is a relationship, right? So if you're like investing all this time and effort and energy into this relationship to help like get the most out of it, and they're just kind of sitting there doing nothing and then blaming you for the failures in the relationship, it sucks. And you feel unappreciated. You question like whether you actually do know what you're doing. It was bad. It is bad. And it's something I definitely avoid now. And even in a little over a year, like, much more comfortable sort of recognizing the red flags, saying no when you see them, etc.
So these are all good lessons. Question: What mistakes did you make during this process?
So I definitely let them dictate the sort of engagement way too much. So I was too willing to let them tell me what to do, and definitely too agreeable, certainly early on, instead of like setting appropriate boundaries. And it can be hard to set appropriate boundaries, and is something I still struggle with now, but like, you cannot send me something on a Saturday morning and expect me to get it out Sunday afternoon. And definitely don't send me a follow-up email Sunday evening following up on your Sunday morning email being like, hey, did you get the email? Have you taken care of this yet? So, you know, if you let people so I definitely let myself kind of get walked all over and did not set appropriate client provider boundaries. That was definitely something that I failed miserably at for sure.
That's, yeah, I like the saying, great fences make great neighbors. And, because you really want to help them and you want them to succeed, your instinct is to not have any fences. So
Right.
it's tough.
Yeah, and ultimately, it's to your detriment. It's to ultimately their detriment and your other clients' detriments as well. And I've gotten very good about saying over the last year, I can't do this for you until X date. And clients will have this in an expectations agreement at the beginning, where they can expect some degree of communication during business days, business hours, business days, but that they need to get things to us at a certain time because we have other clients and we can't put your well-being always above every other client. They have expectations and stuff they need to get done too, and it's not 100% about you. You can't get something to me on a Saturday and expect it to be done on a Sunday. That's unfair to everyone. So I've definitely gotten much better about boundary setting.
A subtle detail I want to add to that is it's important to do that in the beginning, because the way you act in the beginning sets the expectations forever. So if in the beginning you're responding Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, Saturday 4 a.m., then they're like, wow, this guy's going all the time, nonstop, and that's what they think you'll be doing forever. So if you ever one day say it's Saturday 4 a.m., I'm just not going to respond to my client, then that's when the disappointment sinks in.
Yes. So we actually have an expectations agreement that we send during the kickoff process that the client has to agree to, which kind of lays out the ground rules for how the engagement will work, because we want to have a long and successful partnership, but that means there's expectations for us, and that means there's expectations for them as well. It is a partnership, it's a relationship, and we're going to succeed together or we're going to fail together. And these are the things that we expect of you as a client, and these are the things that you can expect of us as an agency in this engagement. And it's all it's spelled out, it's bullets of what we can expect from each other. And it really sets I think, and since I've been using it for not quite a year, I'll call it 8 to 10 months with every client, it sets a good foundation for a respectful and agreeable engagement where both parties know where the other party stands and what they can expect to get out of it.
What I find interesting about that on a personal level is I do the same thing, but I had never heard the phrase expectation agreements before. To me, it's just part of my standard documents about this is how I work, this is what I'll need from you. But I like the idea of codifying it into a signed, formal, separate part, and fleshing that out. It makes it very clear in the beginning.
We talk about it on our kickoff call, and I send the document to the client because it's very important, right? And we can do great work, but it's also about expectations, right? I mean, it's expectation setting. You can get a 5x return for a client and they're making tons of money, but if they were expecting to get a 10x, in their eyes, you're failing miserably. So it's very, in my experience, important to have them set up the expectations so that everyone knows what the situation is and what's being expected of each other.
This is great. Any other learnings or process changes that you made that you made as a result of this experience?
Well, there was definitely the expectations agreement for one.
Yes.
Not continuing to work for clients who don't pay. Like once you get past, so we bill invoices at the start of the month so we just sent out our July invoices yesterday. It's July 2nd when we're filming this, so we sent our invoices for work done in July yesterday on the 1st of the month. If by August 1st, a client has not paid for July, like we're having a conversation about that. And sometimes there's like, oh, the check's in the mail or extenuating circumstances that can come up. I'm not saying like you have to keep this as a hard and fast rule, but by like, I would say like August 15th, if the July check has not arrived, they haven't paid July, like we are not doing any more work. There is no more work. And they've been notified of this, right? So like by August, they'll get a reminder halfway through July, and like, you haven't paid yet. I will personally reach out towards the end of the month, asking them like what's going on. But we'll stop doing work, because if you let a client if you keep working for 3-4 months or something without getting any payment, you're not getting paid.
Right.
And it's another boundary, right? Like ultimately, this is a professional engagement and they pay you for your work. And if you're continuing to work without getting paid, how are you valuing what you do? So definitely not letting people not pay. Another rule lesson I've had to learn multiple times in my career. And I would say my sort of discovery, and this is something that happens, ongoing, and I think people in general should continue to work on, obviously improving all parts of your business. But I've focused a lot on the discovery process and the pre-proposal process, and weeding people out before I even invest the time and energy in putting a proposal together for them, to make sure that they are going to be a partner, and not just someone who's going to expect magical things from the work that you're doing, but are going to be invested in the success of their business as much as you're invested in that success, and screening for those people in the discovery process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you found any formal ways to do it? Because like I screen for that also, but here's how I screen it. After a couple of meetings, like you can usually tell. After 2 meetings, I usually get a sense. But what I haven't done is, okay, here's a question or a test or a thing to do that gives me a strong clue as to whether that'd be this type of client or that type of client. Have you found any tricks like that?
So there's one question that I love to ask, and that's, what experiments have you run recently, and how did they go? Because if they're experimenting and testing things, that shows a degree of both like savviness in terms of operating, but also an investment in improvement in their business, that testing provides. Because like we're split testing ads, we're split testing landing pages. Like testing is the key to incremental improvement and success. And if they are running tests on their own, it indicates a level of investment to me that, it's not a guarantee that they're going to be like great and super invested, but it's in my experience, a good sign that they're willing to put in work and effort into improving their own business because they're doing testing on their own.
I like this. I like this. I might add that question to my discovery as well.
It's great. It's very interesting sometimes, the kind of like things that they'll end up testing. A lot of the time it's email stuff, or UX type things, but testing is critical. And I think if a client is testing on their own, it's great. And you should be testing too on your own stuff. So everything needs to ABT, always be testing, always be testing.
I might use that phrase as well, ABT.
Yeah, no, it's great. I highly recommend adding it to your discovery call for sure.
Okay, this is great. Okay. So, the New Yorker in me will say that your story isn't the most gripping story I've heard, but what I do like about our conversation is usually it's a crazy story, but with one or two small lessons. But what we've done is we've had a normal story, but we've extracted a whole bunch of super interesting lessons. I feel like we've squeezed the lemon dry for this story, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, look, I haven't had, and I say this like from a relationship, like dating standpoint too. I've had like no nightmare first dates where like,
Amazing.
the person like peed at the table or something. But in a way, like those.
I'm glad that no one's peeing at your table.
But in a way, like I find actually you can get a lot more actionable insights about from events that aren't such aggressive outliers, because they're more likely to happen, they're more common, and so you're going to be seeing
Great point.
these situations more frequently. Like a client coming to your house and like threatening to beat you up with a baseball bat, like that's a crazy outlier, but not a lot of sort of actionable things you can take away from that, except keep a crowbar in your apartment or something.
But by the way, I think that's not just a great point. I would make a stronger version of your point, which is this: if you only learn from like the huge things, that means you're a bad student. But someone has to drop a nuclear bomb on you to teach you to like don't invade innocent countries. Like that means you're a bad student. But the good student is the one that where the super little things happen, and then they notice, oh wait, this tiny little thing led to that, so I should improve in this. So even if this story didn't involve anyone peeing on your dinner table, it did say, oh wait, we should have an expectations agreement, and we should get them to sign their name to if they want us to do any changes that's against our professional judgment. And like those two alone probably go a long way towards preventing the nuclear bombs.
That's right. And once the nuclear bomb detonates, like that's it. So just better off avoiding it entirely.
Definitely. I love these, and I think I'm going to adopt these into my process. Any other concluding thoughts on the client, lessons learned, things you've changed, or is that enough for today?
I mean, look, we could go on for hours and hours talking about all kinds of different client lessons. Be judicious in your discovery process. Like, it's like you're not necessarily, and I like to think of it this way. You're not just winning their business, they're winning your expertise. And so you're qualifying them as much as they're qualifying you. So, it's like dating. You need to qualify them just the same way they're qualifying you. And
the more you try to qualify, the more life will pass you by. Is that okay? Sorry, it's a cake song. I've been doing too many Latin forgotten quotes, so I went with one of my favorite 21st century bands.
Okay, well, you had me more in the Latin because I actually did take Latin, so don't remember much of it, but I did take it.
Do you not know Cake? Cake is my favorite band since to the year 2000.
I am familiar with them, but not that familiar with them. So I couldn't quote any lyrics.
They're amazing lyrics. Okay, in the meeting notes, I'll also put a
Yep.
link, a, a
Put
link
some musical links.
to the YouTube video as well. Surprisingly good lyrics to Cake consistently.
I'll put it on the Spotify.
Oh yeah, it was. This was a fun conversation, and I love from the story these different processes that you've extracted. This might be the first one where I've been in two ideas to adopt for my own process. And some of the other ones, I got one idea, but thank you for the insight. It was fun.
Yeah, maybe we'll call this one, instead of like client nightmares, it'll be like client night difficulties or something. I don't know if this qualifies as a kind of like a run-of-the-mill challenges.
To continue with your awesome metaphor of peeing on the table, it would be the client wet dream or peeing in the pants. but I think I do think it's important. We said before that even when it's small, to be able to learn lessons from it. So I think like the lessons that you learned from this story are better than a lot of the lessons that in other podcasts people have gotten from more intense stories. So I wish everyone has less crazy clients and learns more, as opposed to crazier clients and learns less.
And ultimately, your goal is to have as few crazy clients as possible. Like that's
Definitely.
the goal. Keep them in the thick part of the bell curve.
Although there's a craziness money trade-off, I'm willing to have crazy clients if they pay me a lot. So, but
so that's another thing, and I'm sure you do it as well. But sometimes there's someone who really wants to work with you and you really don't, and you set an astronomically high number, and with the hopes that they say no, but it's a number where you're okay if they say yes. So if your standard minimum retainer is $1,000 a month or something, and you say it's going to be 10,000, and they say okay, as long as it's enough money where you're willing to put up with it, there's no harm in trying to get them to say no because it's too expensive. The worst thing that happens is they say yes.
I think in the real world there's a trade-off between between the two. That hey, if someone's a nightmare but they're paying me $1 million, okay, for $1 million I can put up with a nightmare for a few months.
Sure, exactly.
That also it's the old line often attributed to Oscar Wilde, but it could be but it's probably like one of these quotes, everything's attributed to Oscar Wilde, where apparently Oscar Wilde once asked a woman, like an aristocratic woman, to sleep with him for £1 million. And then she said okay, and then, well, how about £1? And he said, what do you think I am? And she said, what do you think I am, a prostitute? And he said, well, you already agreed for the £1 million. Now we're just negotiating the price.
I'm familiar with that one, yeah.
So sometimes with the conversation like that, it feels a little bit too much like being a prostitute. Like okay, I'm willing to put up with bad stuff for more money, but also like, at what point do you just become a prostitute and do anything? And this is a question that I happen to think about a lot, and I personally try to err on the side of avoiding those prostitute instincts.
Depends how much money it is.
Totally.
For $1 million, maybe.
Maybe. Okay. It was fun catching up. I'll put the musical links in the notes, and hopefully some people, hopefully everyone watching this got some good lessons, and contact us with any questions or comments or follow-ups. And I think everyone should start using an expectations agreement as well.
Yeah, no, this has been fun. We always have fun conversations.
Okay, have a good July 4th weekend, to be continued.
Thanks,
Thank you
Morgan. You
everyone for
too.
watching.
Thanks, guys.